home, where my thoughts escaping, home, where my music's playing, home, where my love lies waiting silently for me. Closer to my
Greetings and welcome to RealSavvy. I have the honor and distinction, after not being on here for a while due to COVID, of having the chairman and CEO of Coldwell Banker. Now, I'm not going to go through because it depends on where you Google it, how big they are. They 2, 3. We're number 1 in the world as far as the size of real estate companies, but I'll introduce Mr. Ryan Gorman to WTOB and the virtual office of the virtual audience that we have across the various social media platforms that RealSavvy appears on. Good afternoon, Ryan.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon to you. I appreciate being here. I appreciate the introduction. We'll just go with number 1 in our hearts for Coldwell Banker.
Yes, sir. Now, I don't even know where to start. I mean, the TV's on, where do you start today, the second week of November? Have a conversation with somebody that's been impacted and your organization's impacted so much due to everything. You've referred to it as mayhem and miracles for 2020.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's true. I think that that pretty much sums it up. I mean, 2020 has been a long decade, and November alone has been a long year, I think, is kind of the way I'm thinking about it. But there's a lot of good in there, too. I mean, there's been a lot of really phenomenal stories of communities pulling together, individuals rising, and, and we're in the real estate world. There's a lot of people who are able to do things differently than were before, and they're solving some problems with real estate. So that's great.
That's one of the reasons what made me introduce myself to you and reach out was watching your response to some of the crisis that we had due to social tensions in the country, and you made a very a big effort in your inclusive ownership programs and your social media comments during those periods of time. Would you elaborate a little bit more on your programs that you have?
Oh, sure. Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. So our Coldwell Banker's Inclusive Ownership Program we launched it back in February of 2020. It seems like eons ago, but we actually launched it at the National Association of Real Estate Brokerage's conference in Las Vegas, which for those of you who don't know, you should check out NAREB. I think it's the largest and longest serving Black Trade Association of Real Estate. Great group. At that event, we shared with everyone our really deep commitment to driving change, to doing things differently, to be able to serve more communities more completely. It really starts with, equality of ownership and housing is deeply important to me personally, deeply important to our organization. And we think that real estate professionals are the best suited individuals to help folks understand and gain access to housing and the programs that can help them step into housing. So there's big misunderstandings across the whole country and in every group about what it actually takes to step into home ownership. I'm a personal deep believer that home ownership is a net good in the world for communities and for homeowners. If it's a net good, and if there are communities that are massively underserved, for instance, the Black community in the United States is massively underserved, a huge home ownership gap there between the Black community and the average for the country, as well as other individual groups in the country. There's a group that's underserved, and if real estate agents are the best situated to be able to help folks step into housing through understanding and awareness of programs, et cetera, then we need to make sure we're serving all communities. So when you think about that, then the question for Coldwell Banker, are we serving all communities the way that we want to? And the answer, frankly, was no. After the last real estate downturn, kind of the 2007, 8, 9 period of time, a lot of communities that are the most dramatically impacted, there was a lot of consolidation that took place. Real estate offices and real estate agents consolidated. A lot of real estate agents left the business. And what was left is a lot of historically underserved communities were underserved even more. So as we thought about how to be able to step back into a lot of communities that we historically maybe served, but haven't recently, we thought about entrepreneurship. Real estate's the most entrepreneurial industry in the entire world, bar none, in the US anyway. And our inclusive ownership program is really designed to help real estate entrepreneurs step into brokerage ownership. Maybe existing brokers convert over to Coldwell Banker and grow their business with Coldwell Banker, or individuals who always wanted to explore brokerage, for us to be able to work with them to do so. So the program is really composed of a few main parts, one of which is collaboration and mentorship and guidance. So I'll personally mentor anyone who enters the program, as well as we'll have another leader in our company-owned brokerage partner with them, as well as a franchisee, someone in the affiliate side who's taken advantage of all the programs that we have to offer and understands it and kind of be their guide. We'll also be partnering with them. So at least 3 resources in addition to the resource that every affiliate gets, which is their brand ambassadors and their leaders to partner with them on a daily basis. That mentorship is crucial. The capital investment that we're willing to make in that brokerage, up to $100,000 in every individual brokerage, in addition to waiving some key startup fees and some initial franchising fees. We're investing in that business so that they can grow, so they can establish themselves, maybe reintroduce themselves to the market, grow into new markets, attract new talent, invest in the tools and services their agents need. And we also help them gain access to an annual membership to different groups like NAREB, but there's others as well, that they can partner with trade associations to continue to grow and learn and really deepen that network. So that's the overall sort of where we came from and what the program actually does when it comes to Coldwell Banker inclusive ownership.
Now, you mentioned 07 and 08, and I have to go out to abroad, so I'm going to have to skip around just based on where we're at in the world right now. But you mentioned 07 and 08. Is this really the best time to venture into that? I mean, real estate runs in cycles. Where are we at with that? When does this bubble burst? Because we're doing really, we've been in a good situation for a while now.
Yeah, it ebbs and flows. I mean, if you look at real estate in general, I mean, first of all, the downturn, I'll call it the 08 downturn, was certainly more severe than any real estate downturn, since the Great Depression, really. So historically, with interest rates going up and down, employment going up and down, and maybe housing inventory going up and down, it ebbs and flows. But you're right, we've been in a flow period. We've been in a pretty consistently strong period pre-COVID. During COVID, there was a bit of a lockdown, more severe in some areas than others, but in general, real estate took a dive in terms of the transactions that took place as people were locked down, and frankly, they weren't even able to transact as they wanted to. Now it's come roaring back. So as we think about the cycle, the economic cycle, the real estate cycle, there's a question to your point of sort of like, where are we in that cycle? Well, the roaring back part, it's interesting to look at why it's roaring back, because you can come back because of maybe some artificial things, like maybe some people doing some lending that they shouldn't be doing, maybe getting a little bit too aggressive and risky. Maybe it's because builders are building too much, or because people are buying lots of homes to rent them out, et cetera. Those are some things that would be a little bit of red flags for me. If that's what's driving the market, then those are some red flags. When we look at what's driving the market right now, I don't see that. I see some really fundamental drivers. So for instance, after the last downturn, people started staying in their homes longer than they had in a very long time. Used to be 6-7 years was kind of an average time period for someone to stay in the home. That extended to 10, 11, 12 years after the last downturn for a lot of reasons, many of them economic. That elongation means that we're unnaturally, elongating that period of time. Now we've sort of shrunken that, and you ask the question as to why. Normally what drives home ownership is a family event, someone getting married, having kids, getting a divorce, having a loved one come and live with them, those kind of family events. Maybe job change. That drives a lot of home ownership changes. Today, we've got a lot of people who suddenly are able to work from home. Maybe they're able to work from home fully or partially. Maybe that means that they were in a little bit of a pinch and they were renting and couldn't really afford to buy within a good commuting zone of their place of work. And maybe that employer is now saying, you know what? Why don't you only come in 2 days a week and 3 days a week and work from home? So now suddenly they're saying, well, wait, if that's true, then I can move another 20 minutes west from the city. And 20 minutes west gets me a whole lot more house than I can get here. So I'm going from renter to owner. Or maybe, you know what, grandma, being 3 hours away wasn't that big a deal, but now we've got this, COVID to worry about. And we want her to actually be in our household with us, where we can actually all be together and kind of quarantine together when necessary. And so we need a home that's going to accommodate her. So maybe we need to upsize and maybe sell her property and buy a new property together. Or maybe I can work fully remotely. So I'm going to go ahead and accelerate my plan where I was going to move 3 states away to be closer to the kids. When I retire, maybe I'm going to accelerate that by 5 years and go ahead and make that move today and commute remotely, but for work. Those are fundamental family-oriented changes that people are making to increase their affordability, increase the overall utility of their home, and increase the capability of their family to be able to get the most out of housing. Those fundamentals are what's driving the numbers that we're seeing right now. That is very healthy. So I feel very good about going into even 2021 because it's driven by a lot of those strong fundamentals as opposed to some of these more kind of market-oriented forces.
Well, so that you mentioned the market-oriented forces, COVID. So with that, there's two questions. A, would you consider whatever the government is going to come in and do in the transition of the president, stimulus packages? Would they be artificial boosters to the economy that would have a detrimental effect to the real estate market, or positive effect even?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first part, yes. The second part, a little bit more TBD. So, stimulus is designed to be artificial, essentially, right? So whether you're pumping money into the economy or decreasing interest rates, which we've had both recently,
right?
That's a little bit of an artificial stimulation when things are otherwise, challenged. So I think it will be artificial. And then the question is, what impact does that have on the real estate market? At least initially, the impact that it had at the very first round was not much. If anything, real estate kind of locked down like everything else did, and people took that additional money and made up for household expenses that they weren't able to otherwise, meet for the most part. Today, what people are doing in many cases, we see transactions going up, we see average sales price go up, and people worry about, well, wait a second, is maybe stimulus driving like a challenge in affordability? Is that going to create kind of a bubble to your question? It's not actually what I'm seeing. So we are seeing home prices increase, but we're also seeing people have a greater ability to move toward affordability. Right. So if someone's job affords them to be able to commute less often, then they can move to a more affordable, area. Now, inventory is low and builders haven't been building even enough to replace just the homes that burn down or get flooded for a very long time. So that kind of inventory constraint does definitely create, suddenly an upward pressure on price. We also have a lot of people who were renters who are now looking to buy. Maybe they were renting in a place where they couldn't afford to buy. But now if they don't need to commute every day, then perhaps they can actually afford to buy. Or maybe they were commuting in a way they're not comfortable with anymore. Perhaps they were using mass transit. I'm a huge believer in mass transit, so I don't want that to go away. But we got a lot of people who suddenly are uncomfortable with that and say, you know what, I'm going to, move to a suburb as opposed to the city where I was, because right now I can't really access maybe via transit, or I can't really access the restaurants that I loved or the club venues or whatever the thing is that changed. It's changed their mentality. So I think stimulus is always a concern because there's a downside to it. But I think what we're seeing right now is the really healthy drivers. The biggest driver stimulus that's affecting real estate today is really interest rates, right? So the Fed actions to drive interest rates down, the fact that some of the economic challenges typically drive interest rates, down. We're benefiting from that with the lowest interest rates really in history. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you see the rate quotes today. I mean, anyone who bought their first house in the 70s is looking at the rate and thinking there's a decimal missing somewhere. There's another digit that's supposed to be on that, and that makes it much more affordable for people who even got priced at a 5% interest rate on their last mortgage, which was really good at the time, are now looking at 2.75%.
Yeah, I can remember. I'm old enough to remember when 7% was a good interest rate.
It is. I shudder to think what we're going to do a few years from now when rates aren't at, they don't start with a 2, and people are going to say, oh no, that 4% interest rate is so expensive, I'm not sure I can afford it. But that's what's really benefiting the environment today. I also hope that builders will see some, then they're already starting to see some of this strength and start to reinvest in inventory that's more accessible, more affordable, not just the sort of move up buyer inventory where builders have really been investing their time recently, but some of that more accessible, maybe attached housing, maybe some of that missing middle housing that allows a lot more people to step into home ownership.
But the construction costs are going to be prohibitive to that. Wouldn't you
Construction
agree?
costs are high, land costs are high. There's a lot of regulatory drivers, and we can have, there's an endless debate about, of course, when a regulation is passed, it's oftentimes for a really good reason, right? It's to preserve or protect something oftentimes. But the flip side of that is, complying with the new regulation can sometimes drive some of those expenses up. That's okay as long as the land cost is low or the purchase price is high. Unfortunately, we've been seeing just purchase price high, not land cost low. But you've got some builders who are now looking at it and saying, you know what, I think I can purchase land or build on land on which I had a prior option that is farther away from the job center than it was before, because I think I can now attract people who are willing to do maybe a 90-minute commute each way if they're only going to do it a couple days a week. So now
Exactly.
suddenly they can move toward that land cost low type of building.
COVID and its effect on your agents and your organization as a whole. Do you think these will be permanent changes, or do you think that there's a temporary hold on the majority of them?
Yeah, I think they kind of break down into two different categories. One would be some things that I think are permanent, and I'm glad they're permanent. Like really utilizing some of the digital tools that we've had at our disposal for a while, right? Even something as little as a digital signature and e-notarization. I mean, we can really create a transaction experience for a consumer that is just easier. They're getting documents when they have time to actually review them, on their computer screen, understand what they're signing even better, and be able to sign it at their leisure. So the actual closing table, there's maybe just 2 or 3 documents that they're signing. In some cases, that's done totally virtually now too. But that's sort of, we have a, for instance, guarantee rate affinity flash close program where we provide the documentation in advance. So by the time they get to closing, they have, in a leisurely fashion, worked through the document, the many, many bewildering documents that come at people, had the time to understand them, ask questions about it, sign them, et cetera. For people to be more comfortable doing that ahead of time and digitally, that's here to stay. And I'm glad for it. Another thing that's here to stay, I think, is people being able to maybe winnow down the homes that they're looking at on a search. So that, the classic experience, I'm sure you've seen a million times, someone's coming into town on a Saturday, they've got 14 homes they want to see. They were able to line up 8 appointments. They're going back to back to back. By the time they get to house number 7, they can't remember which house had the granite countertops, and was that the 3-bedroom or the 4-bedroom, and is that the one where you couldn't see out the backyard, and is that the one next to the pig farm? Like, they can't even remember sort of like what they even saw in the first place. I think by people getting a little more comfortable, maybe doing a virtual showing before they go, maybe having an agent during a broker open or with a couple of different clients, do even a Facebook Live event at a house and be able to see something. They can say, you know what, those 2 houses, we can go ahead and take them off the list. This one's not really going to work for us. Let's spend Saturday in 3 properties instead of 8 or 10 or 12. Let's then spend some time downtown. Let's have lunch together outside. Let's check out the playground with the kids. Let's really get to know the community. So our confidence level when we make an offer is higher. We feel great about our understanding of these properties as opposed to that sort of bewildering array that we had before. I think that's here to stay, and that's good. That doesn't mean people are going to do virtual tours and point and click and buy properties that they've never seen before. I'm not a believer in that. I do not think that's going to take over the world. I think it's an edge case that we hear about and read about once in a while where that happens, and it'll keep happening. That's always happened. I rented my first apartment in California from a library in New York, having never been there and not even know what road it's on and not even sure how far it was from my first job because it was a hot market and I didn't have time. I'm an edge case. That's not going to happen a lot of times, So I do think some things are here to stay, but I don't think the extreme version of it is here to stay.
Home, where my thoughts escaping. Home, where my music's playing. Home, where my love lies waiting silently for me.
All things, and I saw I was going to be a little bit all over the place, but getting back to the inclusive ownership program, is that a trend with companies? Are you seeing that happen with other companies around?
Well, I'm seeing, if you look at the entire world in 2020 has been, as I said, you kind of,
And let me back up just a second. I know Coldwell Banker is a part of a major of Realogy, which there are other real estate companies, Century 21, ERA, are all of those companies taking it up too?
Yeah, I think within Realogy, I mean, one of the, as I mentioned in 2020 being, mayhem and miracles, one of the miracles is a lot of individuals and companies and leaders doing some real introspection on like, how much thought and resources have we really allocated to some of the most important things in our company or in our industry. For Coldwell Banker, we were fortunate to have launched that program back in February, which is maybe decades too late, and yet it was early relative to a lot of the industry. So a lot of the industry has paid attention to that and said, well, wait a second, how's this whole thing working? What's the response to it? How are you actually going to do that? How can you possibly facilitate that? And we've been sharing with folks. Now within Realogy Holdings, as you mentioned, Century 21, ERA, Better Homes and Gardens, there's a whole Sotheby's, Corcoran, there's a whole group of firms within that. All of those groups are paying very close attention to what Coldwell Banker is doing, and they're all planning their own programs as well, which will be terrific. They'll learn from what we're doing, and they'll also keep and introduce things that are really core to their values and their systems and their partners and try and leverage their strengths, right? Which is fantastic. Even outside of Realogy competitors, have reached out, and I've got friendly relations with a lot of our competitors, and a lot of them reached out and said, can you just walk me through how some of these things are working? Because we're thinking about our own thing here, but I want to understand like what's working for you and what's challenging. And that's fantastic. If anything, we wanted that to happen, right? If there's some things that we'd love to corner the market on, this is not one of them. If everyone in our entire industry started taking it very seriously and started creating programs that truly brought entrepreneurship as well as support to more of these communities that have been historically badly underserved, then I think we as an industry can make a real impact. Coldwell Banker alone, we're big enough to make a real impact. Imagine if everyone else, invested similarly in their own energies, even if they don't have the resources that Coldwell Banker has, they have time, they have energy, and they have subject matter expertise. So, I'm definitely seeing that pick up. And I think next year we're going to see some companies make some significant announcements. That's my hope anyway.
Are you seeing that your program active in certain parts of the country more than others?
It's interesting. The very first reach outs that we had, a lot of folks, like for instance, NAREB members or people who were at the conference and kind of got a firsthand look, and we had a lot of conversations about, were really from all over the country. So I'd say that the most dominant sections of the country very initially were the South and the Midwest. And it really bookends between some core urban markets as well as some almost rural markets, some markets that are in kind of tertiary markets or even outside of tertiary markets. So I don't know what I expected exactly. I did expect maybe a little bit more in California than we initially saw. Of course, 2 months fast forward, one of the first launches we had was in California, and a lot of the people who are working their way through the program today are in California. So it's really been across the board. We've had anything from a market that is one of the biggest cities in the country to a market that the entire county probably only has maybe 30 or 40,000 people in it, and that's fantastic. So to me, that speaks volumes of like there's something real here. There's something that's very appealing. And in real estate, one of our great leaders, Kate Rossi, and another George Hackett, they often say people are more alike than different. And that's definitely true in real estate. So something core to this program seems to appeal across the board.
Well, I truly appreciate your time. I'm not going to keep you anymore. I'm amazed that you took time to come on the Really Savvy, and I truly appreciate it. I'm going to ask you to come back when market factors change or anything that goes on in the industry, because you're a very, you're an industry leader. So I appreciate having the opportunity to have you on.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And one thing we can count on in real estate is things changing. So that probably won't take too long.
Yes, sir.
Thanks so much for having me.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.
All right.
Home, where my thoughts escaping home.